Welcome to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Established in 2016, the Fintech Times is a global multimedia news outlet centered around the world's first leading fintech newspaper. We report on the latest and brightest ideas from the fintech world. Follow the conversation using hashtag TFD News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times. Hello, and welcome back to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. We are here to give you all the insights about all the fun things going on in the fintech world. Francis, Tom, thank you once again for joining me. How are you guys doing this week? Tom, I know you were doing something exciting yesterday.
Oh, it was a very exciting day. I went to the Anti-Financial Crime Summit and we learned a lot about anti-financial crime. So it was interesting. We got a roundup out already on the Fintech Times that you can go and check out for a little plug. And it was a good day, very interesting. A lot of experts, and now we're back in the office covering the news.
Lovely stuff. And Francis, how about you? Anything exciting?
Hey guys, I think always exciting at the Fintech Times, but I think in terms of what I've been up to this week, it's been sort of just holding down the fort really, and just making sure we've got a lot of interesting news going out, and I think we've got some fun topics to talk about today.
Absolutely, and we've definitely got some interesting news to talk about. But Francis, what are you going to be bringing to the table today?
I'm going to be talking about Coinbase and how it's launched its new ambassadors pilot program in Italy.
Fantastic stuff. And Tom, what are you bringing?
I am going to be talking about the new fintech strategy aiming to make Lithuania the number one fintech hub in Europe.
Fantastic. And then I'm going to be talking about open banking payments are set to replace standing orders in Britain. So 3 very different articles today, so this should be a really good one. Francis, I'm going to pick on you to go first because yours has intrigued me, so you go ahead.
You know what's funny about that is I was actually going to suggest or volunteer going first, so...
Oh, there we go.
Funny how things work out.
Kismet, let's go.
So, yeah, Coinbase is once again in the news for good reasons this time, because I know we've spoken about some issues in the past, be it lawsuits or sort of clashes with regulators. But it's in the news and it's doing well. And it's about the exchange's latest expansion into Italy. So Coinbase has launched its Coinbase Ambassadors pilot program in Italy to provide selected ambassadors with the chance to represent Coinbase at local crypto events across the country, in addition to building and managing online communities for the exchange. So the candidates are chosen by Coinbase from across the country, and they will create a team consisting of 6 members, 1 part-time community manager, and 5 ambassadors. And the responsibilities of these roles include participating in other community forums and crypto communities and groups, creating and curating content for these communities, engaging with crypto events, and so on and so forth. And this has come off the back of Coinbase announcing Ireland as its MiCA, or MiCA, entity location, which has established the exchange in line with European regulations, and also as it's making moves towards its go broad, go deep strategy, which is on Coinbase's site, I should say. They've said that the strategy looks to enact clear rules, innovation of more efficient and more accessible products and services, and just improve user trust created through these products and services as its formula for long-term growth. What I thought was just really cool is it's nice to see crypto establishing itself and its reputation once again. And I think this is just a great step in the right direction, especially in terms of European crypto. Because, if we look at, the MiCA regulation was a very important milestone for, I don't know if milestone is the right word, but definitely it's going to be a pillar of crypto regulation going forward in Europe. And of course, the FCA recently made its crypto marketing rules, and as a result, we saw that Binance had to announce it was no longer going to onboard new customers, and it was pausing updates. And I remember we spoke about how it was, in a way, a good thing that Binance was doing that, as it was slowing down. It was sort of more just, it was slowing down that negative reception that crypto has of not being regulated, and it was sort of saying, no, look, we are going to be regulated. And of course, it was irritating for all users, as they're not going to get updates. But I do think that this move by Coinbase is sort of just reaffirming that, crypto exchanges are going in the right direction. They are trying to be compliant. And I think it's just a very, very good thing for the community. So I wanted to really get your guys' thoughts, really. And, if you'd want to see other exchanges following suit exactly, or, that sort of thing. So, Tom, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, I think this seems like another story that's just been added to a list of stories, like you mentioned, about Coinbase and their sort of European expansion. And I find it really interesting, actually, that I remember covering their sort of expansion into Spain and becoming regulated with the Bank of Spain and getting the necessary licenses. And it's interesting that they're sort of approaching so many places in Europe at once. And they've done quite well in that they've picked kind of Italy and Spain as areas that they know crypto is quite popular in these locations, as opposed to maybe other places in Europe. And it's focusing its initial expansion on that. So I think it's making the right kind of moves in terms of, trying to expand, really establishing itself as a leader in crypto when it comes to Europe. And it seems like a good move. I think often when we talk about crypto, we think about, it's mainly the established players are all focused on North America, and that's where people most what's the word, like they're really excited about crypto still, whereas much of the rest of the world it's kind of died down. And I think it's interesting that Coinbase has decided, let's focus on Europe now, focus on European expansion. And they're really picking their targets quite well. It certainly seems like early doors. And yeah, I think it's just an interesting area that they seem to be doing really well in, and they're continuing their expansion very quickly. We're getting a lot of these stories coming out sort of seemingly every month at the moment. So I think it's just a case of it needs to keep doing what it's doing, and these kind of moves can only really be beneficial to both Coinbase and the crypto space just in Europe in general.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point, sort of that idea of the differing attitudes, I guess. Well, you sort of touched on it at least, of, North American and European crypto. Because I think, I remember I've just had to double check when it was, and this just shows how quickly the year's gone by. Because I always think that this article was really, really recent, but it was in April, and it was when Coinbase was hinting a move at potentially moving its headquarters to Bermuda, as it secured the digital asset business license in April. And then obviously in June, it clashed with the SEC. And then we've seen it expand to other places as well. But I think it is really interesting and really cool to see that Coinbase has recognized Europe as an innovative region for crypto. And I think it is hopefully a sign that, we'll see some clearer regulations come out in North America as well, so that everyone is sort of really on board and on the same page. And I think obviously that is very much in an idealistic world, but I think that still is a pretty cool end game to try and aim for, or end goal to aim for, I should say. So yeah, no, Polly, what are your thoughts? Do you agree, disagree? Think that is a good move by Coinbase?
Yeah, so I think you guys have I agree with everything you guys have said so far. I think it's a really good move. You all know a lot more about crypto in Europe than me. I'm not too familiar with the space and how popular it is over there, but it seems like, any expansion into growing markets is always great. I think the thing that I particularly really like about this is this idea of the ambassador itself, like the six ambassadors that they're going to have in Italy. I think that is an absolutely fantastic idea that I would like a lot more, not even just like crypto companies, but like financial companies to sort of get on board with as well. The idea that you have like a physical person within your community that can be there to like field questions, help create content, and like feedback then to like Coinbase as well, sharing news, product announcements, help with product testing. I think that's just a really interesting role for a crypto company to bring on, but one that I think will be so beneficial and so helpful. I think when it comes to finance and things like crypto, though in its sort of very nature it's not a wholly social thing, actually it is quite community based. And I think especially with crypto and kind of like I know there's a lot of like online forums, and like you get kind of like a big sort of internet following of crypto, like it comes up on my TikTok all the time. There's a big community here, and having people within that community, almost like boots on the ground, being able to be not only sort of like a figurehead of your company that's like actually physically tangible, like you've got an ambassador there, I don't know, Dave, and Dave's always going to be there, that you can send him a message about Coinbase and he's probably going to answer you. I think that's really, really cool. And especially when it comes to sort of creating content for the communities and sort of engaging with the forums. and just generally being like representatives of the company, I just think is a really brilliant idea and something that I would really like to see across, the industry. I think it's something that can be really beneficial. We talk a lot about this, is kind of a bit of a tangent, but we talk a lot about financial education on this podcast and how it's really important to get people to understand how to use their finances. And I feel like something like an ambassador role like this is one of the ways that we can actually do that, and do that in a way that makes sense and works. Like having a person there as a representative of your company, but also is just kind of like a representative of the community. Brilliant. So no, I hope this goes really well for them, and I hope that they get some real results with this ambassador program to the point where we see other people following suit. I think it's going to be brilliant.
I think as well, when you think about, like you sort of mentioned there, the nature of crypto and the fact that it is solely digital, you don't sort of have crypto branches like you do with banks, right? And I'm just thinking about the sort of the application of sort of this ambassador program, sort of in light of perhaps a neobank, for example, and sort of them going to these community things and sort of really just putting boots on the ground, like you said. I think it's just it's a very, very good point that you've sort of brought up there, which it is just this community feel, and it does just add that level of, as we are in a digital world, we're moving away from this level of humanization that everyone always talks about. But by bringing back these ambassadors, bringing back people that, like you said, like Dave, you could always rely on Dave to be there. And because of that, I think that is a really, really cool, it's a cool method and a cool idea by Coinbase. And like you said, I hope it really does sort of show dividends and sort of do well. We'll go with you, Polly. You nominated me. I'll nominate you.
That's fair. I can take that. So we're moving on to talking about open banking payments. And new research from MoneyHub has found that open banking payments are set to replace standing orders as Brits want new recurring payments tech. So, as I'm sure we'll all know, the UK has been a leader in the open banking space since its official launch in 2018, and often provides like a pretty good model that for other countries to kind of follow suit. Like, I don't think it's vain to say that the UK has been doing open banking pretty well. And now its adoption has really steadily increased to the point where 1 in 5, or 21% of British people, are now making regular payments using the technology. So this new research from MoneyHub has essentially found that although cards are still the dominant payment method of choice when it comes to making payments, lots of alternatives are being looked at, and particularly open banking payments are one of those alternatives. And the ability to make a payment directly through their phone's banking app or online banking account is sort of very desirable for British people at the moment, because they can make, faster, more cost-effective payments. And it's just a little bit easier, especially when you kind of compare it to standing orders, direct debits, or card payments. So I just thought this would be an interesting one to talk about, because I don't think we talked about open banking for a little while on the podcast, actually. And kind of where we're seeing the space going, because obviously we reached a big milestone earlier this year, according to MoneyHub's research, with 11.78 million transactions happening over open banking in September, which is absolutely massive, following a surge of active payment users in July 2023 compared to the same month in the previous year. And I guess it's very interesting. I mean, payments are always one of those things we come back to because they're such a tangible thing, but kind of it's interesting to see the evolution, right? How we went for sort of like checks and cash to standing orders and direct debits, and then now, to open banking tech. So I'd really want to get your guys' sort of opinions about where you see this going. Like, what is it about open banking payments that people love? Are we going to see, people continue down the trend until standing orders and direct debits are almost, non-existent? Is it because they're flexible? Is it because they're fast? What is it about open banking payments that are making, consumers so excited? But Francis, what do you think?
I think it's sort of something we've spoken about before, really, in the sense that having one option over various options is never really going to be the way forward. And I think when you're talking about instant and flexible payments, I think sometimes you just want to know with a standing order or a direct debit, for example, that it's leaving your account and you don't need to authorize it, or you've authorized it that first time to get it gone, and then that's it. And I think when you're making open banking payments, I think to have the access and sort of to give access, I should say, to merchants to sort of get directly in contact, and you're just paying directly through the bank and stuff. I think when you're looking at it from that way, I think that is where you can really sort of say, well, depending on what I'm doing, this is where this payment type, be it open banking or standing order, whatever it might be, can really become more helpful. But I thought, well, at least what I found really interesting was sort of the amount of people by their age groups that were really using open banking payments. And I think it's I almost want to say it's no surprise that it's the younger generation that are using open banking payments. But I would say it is a bit of a surprise considering the things that we talk about on the podcast and the news that we've covered on the site. We have the misconception that the older generations aren't aware of new technology. I think we've disproved it before, and that they are very aware. But regardless, I did find it very interesting to see that 70% of Brits use direct debit, whereas only 47% of 16 to 24-year-olds are using that payment method, whereas 21% of Brits are using open banking through their phone, and 29% of 16 to 24-year-olds are using open banking payments. And I thought that was a really interesting figure, and I think that is definitely in the next decade or so one that's going to increase, because the more people that use the technology, I don't think they're going to stop using it. So I think it's definitely one to keep an eye on, but I don't think we're really going to see a big difference in at least 10 years.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thought. And I think what you're saying about the ages is quite interesting as well. Like, I do think that when it comes to sort of open banking, the general lay person, I don't think would necessarily know what it was. I don't know if that's me making a stretch, but if I asked my parents what open banking was, they wouldn't have a clue. They'd probably never heard of it before. So I think that's interesting, even though they probably used it. Like they probably used it quite a lot in their sort of financial life. They probably wouldn't know what it was. So I wonder if that has much of an impact on people's usage. But Tom, what do you think? What are your thoughts on open banking?
No, I think you're spot on with what you said there. I think most people don't even realize or know what open banking is, as you said. But as its adoption slowly increases, it's clear that it's something that people are interested in, even if that interest is like completely unintentional or like subconscious, because they don't know exactly what they're using. Um, but something I heard a lot at Open Banking Expo, I think that was a few weeks ago, a month ago now. And obviously, open banking is the focus there. And people are often talking about the UK has been a trailblazer in open banking. It was the first one to kind of introduce it in 2018, as you said. But recently, there's been a kind of number of other regions that are playing catch up, and it's almost there's a threat now that we might not be the region that is revolutionizing the space, and we might actually be falling a little bit behind because of a lack of innovation. But I think this kind of news that shows adoption is slowly increasing can only help the space and help the region kind of stay ahead of the game, as it were, because I'm something I heard a lot at the expo as well was open banking can be considered completely successful when no one knows that they're actually using it. So I think that's an interesting thing to keep in mind as well. And with adoption just slowly increasing, it's not going to be as Francis said, it's not going to be something that happens really quickly. But the fact that there is that trend going on, you can almost expect that will just slowly continue. And while I don't think we're going to see the complete erasure of other payment methods and options, certainly the more people are using it and the more innovation that is going to come out of that. And therefore, I think this kind of news can only be a very positive thing for the future of open banking as well as the sort of current space.
Yeah, fantastic. That's really interesting. I think you've summed that up really well. To the point where I have anything else to add. So, Tom, why don't you take it away on your article?
I would be delighted. So, as I said at the start, this is all about a new fintech strategy that's aiming to make Lithuania the number one fintech hub in Europe. So basically, what this is all about is Lithuania has released a new industry strategy highlighting its plans and goals for the fintech sector. So basically, Lithuania's 2023 to 2028 fintech strategy is ultimately, as the title suggests, aiming to make the country the leading fintech hub in the whole of Europe. Basically, throughout the last decade, the fintech industry in Lithuania has seen significant growth. In 2014, it was home to just 55 fintech companies, but in 2021, that number had risen to 265 fintech firms. So this article is based on the fact that we got to hear from Simonas Kripsta. I hope I've pronounced his name right. but he's a member of the board at the Bank of Lithuania. And he basically explains that currently more than 25 million Europeans are benefiting from the financial services of companies licensed in Lithuania. So they're really trying to enhance on what the reputation that they've already built, and really drive the fintech sector specifically. And they're trying to do that with 5 guiding principles that are supporting the qualitative development of the fintech sector, attracting innovative fintech solutions to Lithuania, ensuring that Lithuania is the center of excellence for fintech, ensuring that Lithuania is a safe and reliable jurisdiction, and ensuring that Lithuania is universally recognized as a European fintech hub. Now, my first sort of initial thought of these is they're not very specific. They're quite just generic statements. We want to make us the best in this, but when you look deeper into the fintech strategy, you realize that they have set out a number of aims and initiatives to try and achieve these, and they have actually set specific performance indicators to identify if they're actually on track to achieve these or not. And these include facilitating a 30% annual fintech revenue growth rate by serving at least 35 million fintech clients by 2028, and reducing the number of fintech companies facing talent shortages down to 30%, and that currently sits at 62%. So something that Lithuania is really focusing on is collaboration between banks, fintechs, financial institutions, and the regulators. And to me, this seems like a really strong approach, and that's kind of what I wanted to get your guys' take on. Is something obviously we hear a lot about is one of the key challenges across Europe for fintechs and financial firms is quite a fragmented regulatory landscape. All the different countries are, it seems like they're at different stages, they have different approaches, and it makes it really difficult for the EU to introduce fast-paced changes because they need to consider so many different viewpoints. So this kind of initiative coming from Lithuania, they know exactly what they want to do. They know how they want to achieve it. There's no questions about, how are we going to approach this? They set everything out really clearly. And obviously we don't have the time to go through the whole strategy, which is quite long together, but there are a lot of very specific goals and aims and ways of achieving these. So with this in mind, I just wanted to get your guys' take on what do you think about Lithuania's efforts? Do you think this is an aim of becoming the leading fintech hub for Europe is possible, given the strength of other fintech hubs on the continent? But yeah, just really want to get your guys' take on where you think this is, and do you think their aims are actually a bit too ambitious, or are they spot on to be aiming high? Polly?
You know what? I don't think you can ever have too many fintech hubs. I feel like the more sort of concentrated fintech industry, little pieces everywhere, I think is can only be a good thing. Surely, like I think Lithuania has some bold ambitions here, and I love that for them. But I think when you see the growth that they've had, obviously the 55 companies in 2014 to the 265 companies in 2021, that's pretty significant growth. You know what I mean? And that's nothing to be sniffed at all. And I think that this strategy, while obviously it's very ambitious and they've got a lot of work to do and they want to make their country a leading hub, I don't see it as unrealistic. I think it could be very interesting, and I think um they've already established themselves as a pretty decent entrance into the market in the fintech sector, and especially when it comes to like their risk and things like that. It's all right. So I don't think it's too lofty ambition for Lithuania to be aiming high. I think what they're saying about collaboration is really interesting, and I think obviously that's where we're seeing all over the industry and like people's strategies and different company strategies all kind of focusing on collaboration, which is fantastic. And I think the potential support to businesses from the government as well, I think will be fantastic. That was mentioned very briefly in the piece as well. Yeah, I mean, I'm not really finding a lot of negative things to say about this. I'm sure Francis, Devil's Advocate, might have a different opinion over there. But no, I think I'm really excited to see how Lithuania does. I think you're right. Regulation is going to be a difficult one, especially when it comes to crypto. Obviously, we were talking before about Mica. I think that could be a bit of a sticky point here as well. But as long as you kind of have a plan, and it looks like they do have a plan for that, I don't see that being too much of a problem. As any more than a problem than it is anywhere else. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see if Lithuania pulls this off. I mean, they've got 5 years to do it. A lot can happen in 5 years. Who's to say? Who's to say?
No, exactly. And I think that's the one thing that struck me is everything seems really positive. There was never any areas I thought, well, that's a bit of a grey area. They haven't been very specific about that. They've been very calculated in their approach, and I think that's really positive for the region. And as you said, that there are a lot of initiatives there, and we didn't quite get to touch on all of them, but there seems like they're doing a lot, and there's a lot of focus and a lot of ambition, and that can only be a good thing for the future. But obviously, as you said, we've got our very own devil's advocate, and let's see what Francis's take us on this.
Do you know what's funny is I don't think I've been quote unquote the devil's advocate for almost a month now, and I really wish I could be here, but unfortunately I can't. I'm gonna have to sort of agree with everything that Polly said and sort of just echo all of it really, because when I was reading through this, I didn't at all sort of think, oh, this is out of reach, this isn't possible. The entire time I was just thinking it grew, as you guys mentioned, and it from 55 fintechs in 2014 to 265 in 2021, and it did plateau in 2022, but 2022 was a difficult year for fintech anyway. But I think what was most encouraging is the way that the Lithuania is addressing all the big aspects of the fintech world, and I think as Polly sort of touched on as well, that the article does discuss the MiCA regulation, or as Mika, as I always say for some reason. I don't know why it is spelled MiCA, so it does make more sense. But yeah, just the fact that the bank does address, the Lithuania is addressing this, and as Krepster said, the Bank of Lithuania will be responsible for licensing crypto companies, and we are preparing for that. However, market access will be granted only to applicants who can prove their maturity and commitment to compliance, with particular attention to AML and counterterrorism financing area. And I think that in and of itself is just a really, really encouraging sign and reassuring sign as well, that Lithuania knows what it wants to achieve and knows that it is achievable, but only wants to achieve the best as well and invite the best to be a part of it. And all of those things put together, I think, is a massive recipe for success.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, all I can really do is echo what you guys have already said, but it seems like a really strong platform for Lithuania to continue growth, and it'll be really interesting to see actually how much of this it can achieve. And if it really does achieve all its kind of performance indicators in 2028, then I think it would certainly be, if not the leading fintech hub in Europe, it would certainly be up there with some of the best that are already doing it. So yeah, certainly an area that to keep an eye on, and it's got some great initiatives to try and achieve those.
Amazing stuff. Well, that does bring us to the end of our discussion this week. I feel like we've had three really interesting, very different stories. So thanks, guys. If you want to hear any more about anything we've talked about today or anything else from the fintech world, head on over to thefintechtimes.com, where you can read plenty more news and insights over there. But very quickly, let's move on to what I learned this week. So each week, we learn so much new information with all the news and insights that cross our desks at the Fintech Times that we thought it would be fun to share that with our listeners. So, Francis, what have you learned this week?
So what stuck out to me this week was a guest post we got from the Payments Association, in which we learned about how e-waste is actually impacting sustainability and how it's time for payments companies to really change their attitudes and put a focus on it. And e-waste is just something that we don't really hear about that much. So yeah, definitely an article that I would recommend checking out.
Very interesting. Tom, what have you learned this week?
This week, I learnt that challenger banks, notably Monzo and Starlin, are the most trusted by consumers when compared to traditional banks, according to the new Trust in Banking Index by Fairer Finance.
Very nice. And then what I learned this week is that 77% of UK SMEs are using technology to facilitate their goals, which I just thought was really interesting when we talked about it last week. But no, thank you so much, guys, for joining me once again on the podcast. It has been a pleasure to talk about fintech with you. And I'll catch you on the next one.
See you guys next week.
See you then.
Thanks for listening to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Don't miss next week's episode and continue the conversation using #TFT News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times.